Okay, hello. Well, for everyone in class last night, thanks for a great class. Appreciate that. And if you remember from my lectures, I always like to start off with something a little bit humorous. Here we go. This is an ottoman, holding an ottoman. Wait for it. That's funny. How Texans view the U.S., even Hawaii and Alaska, Canada. And finally, remember these far sides we talked about? I was impressed. I had a few students, 3 or 4 of you, that actually knew Gary Larson. Good stuff. Moses parting his hair. Okay, the Muslim world or the Ottoman Empire. Here we go. Try to slow down a bit, and I do apologize for going fast, but here goes. We had a good talk last night with our historical timeline that I was unable to put up on the board. I'm very sorry about that. Uh, Usually we have a whiteboard in there, but everyone gets the point. We have a timeline going left to right. You have a break in that timeline. And why is that break there? And we've discussed it, the birth of Christ. And we discussed all of that. So here is the point of I told you Muhammad's born in 570, dies in 632, and Islam comes around. It is one of the 3 Abrahamic religions. Again, if that goes over your head or just doesn't resonate with you, be sure to use the Pocket Rocket, the Google machine, and look it up. Abrahamic, Father Abraham. Judaism, Christianity comes out of that, the cult of Christianity it's called, and then eventually Islam. So Muhammad, real quick, there's not a lot of evidence that Muhammad, historically at least, he was a real person, but this isn't a real bother as Arabs at the time in this area were not great record keepers. They kept things verbally, and also after his death, his followers really tidy up his image and don't want anything written about him, which we still see today in images of the prophet and things like that are protected. So not a big deal. You can trace that back to all kinds of things. Was Moses a real person? Was Abraham a real person? All these historical figures. So who are Arabs? Well, this is a great question. I think all Americans should have an answer to. So I'm going to tell you a quick story and do it as best I can here. If you follow, so sometimes the Bible works as a religious book, and sometimes it does an okay job of interacting with history and being an actually part of a historical timeline. I mean, if you believe the story of the Semitic people in this land of Canaan, there's a man named Abram. And God talks to him, which, yeah, as we've talked about in class, he might want to seek some mental help on that if you hear God talking to you. But the way the story goes in, God tells this man Abram, who he later renames Abraham, I will make a great nation out of you. And I want you to go, and I want you to sleep with your wife and have a kid. And they're both very old at this time. And his wife, Sarah, giggles at him. So, ladies, don't giggle at God. And for everyone else, I think it's pretty cool that, God's telling you, hey, go sleep with someone. All right. I never hear that. And my wife never believes it. But instead, Sarah says, hey, I'm too old. My womb is barren. You can sleep with my maidservant, Hagar. Now that I can tell you for sure never happens when my wife does not say that, okay? And so one of these jokes I'm making here, people, I hope you understand, it's pretty odd, right? And this is in the Bible that we read as Christians, as Muslims read, as Jews read, God telling people who to go sleep with. It's a little odd in modern day. And he does, and Hagar produces a child. And this child's name is Ishmael. And God then later comes to Abraham and said, you did not obey me. I said to sleep with your wife. She's not barren. In fact, because he had slept with her already, I think, something the story goes, she already is with child from Abraham. And so she has now Sarah, his real wife, not his maidservant, has another child. And they name him Isaac. So what happens is, because of the tension, I mean, imagine that in your household in modern day, right? That's awkward. So they send Hagar and Ishmael away out into a barren land, for the most part, wanting to get rid of them. But God says, I also have a plan for you, and I will also make you a great nation. And there you go. As it says right there, as you can see in the bolded part in the middle, Muhammad later will simply, as an Arab, trace all of his lineage back through and say, yeah, the Jews, even the Christians have messed all this up. The real lineage, the real son of Abraham that is supposed to lead and be a great people are Arabs. Because we are sons of Abraham also. And you've probably heard this song if you ever went to Sunday school. Father Abraham had many sons. Father Abraham. I was letting you sing there on your own, okay? And the point is, Isaac, who is the son of Abraham and Sarah, is the son of Abraham. But who else is? That's correct. Ishmael. They're stepbrothers. Kind of like the Will Ferrell movie, right? So this should, I think I mentioned this in class, but this is the lecture here, should open your mind to this about Arabs and Jews today in this modern fight between Israeli and Palestinians, or Jews and Arabs. So as I said, do they have, sometimes we think of they have nothing in common. These people have nothing with religion. No, they have everything in common. Everything is important to them. They share the same God. They share the same Father. They share the same religion. They share the same land area. That's why the tension there is so intense. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. We're going to skip the next. Sunni Shiites we already talked about too. You should know that. The two sects of Islam. Pretty mild compared to, say, Christianity, as we learned last night with the Protestant Reformation, and just hundreds, if not hundreds, of Protestant sects. Christianity is way more divided. Okay, moving on. We mentioned this too. Remember last night, the Dark Ages, somewhere around 500. Western Roman Empire falls apart in 472 or 3. I think it's 3, without my notes in front of me. And after that, from about 500 until about 1400 or so, before the Renaissance, Europe falls into what's known as the Dark Ages. They literally, and the point of this we talked about, why was the Catholic and the Orthodox Church? Religion was more important. This new religion of Christianity and anything of the Greeks and the Romans was seen as sinful and out worldly. But at the same time, as you can see here, this is a global apex of Islamic culture and power. And also when we get to the Asian empires, you'll learn that about the Chinese also. So the point is, if you're looking at this, at this time Europe would be maybe on even a downward angle, or maybe flat at best, but on a gradual angle up, improving with technology, with science, would be the Muslim empires. Real quickly, they invented the astrolabe. It's a labe that astros. That's not really true, but it has to do with sailing and how you align with the stars and astronomy, so you know where you're at in your longitude and latitude, I'm pretty sure. The Chinese invent the magnetic compass. So the point is, Europe will be like a kid in a candy store in the 1400s when Copernicus, Kepler, and people like that come around. And all of a sudden, science will be unleashed to them, and they will be so excited to have it that they will just go crazy with it, and they will eventually conquer the whole other half of the world. That makes sense. I hope it does. But to Arabs and Muslims, Arabs and the Chinese, this is not a big deal. They've had a long established history of scientific works that they've gradually been working on. They see no reason to all of a sudden jump out and use all these to conquer other people with. So it's not surprising that the last great Muslim empire, right, is at the end when it's at the beginning of the first modern European empires coming to arise. Okay? And also the Mongols. We can never forget the Mongols. Genghis Khan, we're not talking about it, but they conquer very much vast lands of these great Islamic empires and really is detrimental in holding them down from advancing into the modern world. Okay, moving along. There you go, the Ottoman Empire, as I told you, 1280 to 1918. That is an empire right there. So anytime we get on our high horse about America, this great empire, we've been around barely 200 and some years. You can do the math. It's very short. And it doesn't mean we're not great, but we're very, very young in our infancy. Look at that. It's a almost 700-year empire. Okay, and you can see where it is. It is typically an Islamic empire, starting out of the Arabian Peninsula, Egypt, and that area, and then, of course, expanding up through Europe, as it will do. You hear this a lot, that's what's wrong with Islam. It's always been this aggressive nature in conquering. Sure, and so is Christianity. How is it spread by the Roman Empire? By the sword. By Charlemagne, I would argue by the sword. So it's nothing unusual for the time. Origins, founded by a guy named Osman. And as we mentioned in class last night, they have a sultan. Remember last night we lecture on absolute power and absolutism, kings and queens in Europe. Well, in these Ottoman areas, they have pretty much the same thing as sultan. However, in contrast, to learn so we can compare these, what you find out is, ready for this? Wait. They didn't. Remember last night in England what happened when the Catholic king went into a Protestant village? What did he do? Bam. Remember I made the example. Heads off. You're either Catholic or you're dead. And they had this back and forth with Oliver Cromwell, with all the kings and queens. Real problem. Well, for the most part in the Ottoman Empire, they're extremely tolerant at this time in the 12, 13, 14, and 1500s. They absorbed territories. They did conquer them, but once they did, they said, look, it's simple. Do you want to convert to Islam? And most people, no. Well, typically, your head would fall on the ground and move to the next person. Well, the Ottomans found, hey, that's fine. You can stay here, and we're going to form you in millets. Millets are little bitty societies within the Ottoman Empire, you can keep your own religion, but you must follow all Ottoman rules. So look, when I say the word tolerant, it's not like we think of it today, but it's extremely tolerant for the time. There also is a penalty, though, and that penalty is the jizya, so be sure to know that, and it's a tax. An example may not be exact, but Muslims in the empire pay a 1% tax. If you live in a millet and you retain your own religion and customs, you pay a 10% tax. So there is a penalty. It's not extremely tolerant, but it's much more than most places. And then under Sultan Muhammad here, real quick, the second, he's one of these great rulers. They expand up into Europe, and they almost capture the city. Next slide. Sorry about that, my fault. They capture the city of Constantinople, the main city of Eastern Christendom, and they rename it Istanbul, okay, which it still is called today. So they're an expansive empire. Again, nothing unusual for anything in the world. And there you can see, and what's next on the horizon? Suleiman the Magnificent nearly captures Vienna. It's also their downfall as they extend themselves too much. You'll see with almost every empire. Uh-oh, America, look out. Right, constantly extending, constantly doing this, always makes your empire fall apart. But Suleiman the Magnificent tries to take Vienna. If you guys know a little about world history, but maybe not, you're learning. Historically, if you capture Vienna, it's the gateway, the roadway to Paris, and then most of Europe will fall. So this is a fascinating, when I do this in class, we spend a little more time on this, a little bit of history, what ifs. What would the world be like if the Ottomans had captured Vienna and then taken Paris? You can kind of play that around in your head, I hope, right? Of Europe being Muslim in the 14 and 1500s before Columbus sailed. So fascinating idea. Janissaries. Janissaries are Christian soldiers who are fighting against the Muslims. They're captured, and then they're given this option. You can live in a millet and be nothing, pay your extra tax, or you can convert to Islam, fight with us, live in the harem, and be the best soldiers ever. Now, modern day Americans and students, is a little hard to explain, as we well know. You imagine Americans today, we lost, in Vietnam, convert to communism. Oh, no, your last breath would be dying. No, capitalism, right? Because we have this big thing we talked about last night, nationalism. So it gets in the way of our understanding. But at this time, that doesn't exist, and we discussed this in class. People's allegiance is to, right, their religion. So they are. Sometimes I'd call it more superstition. But say they're Christians, they're soldiers, and they've lost. How they rationalize this? They look at it and say, well, this is the new God. It is an Abrahamic religion, and maybe our old God has just lost, and this one's more powerful. So they do convert, not all of them, but many, and they're this powerful fighting force. Again, showing you they don't completely destroy their enemy. Harem is very simple. It's like the imperial palace that we saw of Louis XIV last night. Many Westerners look at it as a whorehouse in this, but no different than an imperial palace where the Sultan himself goes in and has concubines and wives and sleeps with them to produce this male heir that we spoke about last night in class, right? The male heir. So hopefully you can see here as we compare these, a lot of similarities, but also some differences in how these areas are run. Quite fascinating, but still in somewhat have a common thread. Under Solomon, you can see here the Magnificent, he spreads it almost gets into part of Europe, but the Christians will repulse that around the 1500s. Finally, the Ottoman decline. It's more of a seesaw, right? It doesn't just end, so Americans keep that in mind also. Some things, unlike the German Empire, that just stops, thankfully for us, but this takes a while to slowly break down. They fight a two-front war. Only never get involved in a land war in Asia, and only less well-knowns never get involved with the Sicilian when death is on the line. Okay, right? That's from Princess Bride. But don't fight a two-front war. The Germans, Hitler, everyone, we know this. War on one side, war on the other. Keep it in mind. We're going to talk about it later. The Janissaries, the failure to take Vienna, definitely a big downfall for them. They spend too much money. Economic problems. Take a look at us. We have that problem? Yeah. Look at our military budget. Some 30%, right? Many people are worried about that. We spend too much on it. Coffee houses. People go. It's a way of, remember, this is not an absolute society, but it's not a very open society. Coffee houses come around. You can have conversation and caffeine. Talk crap on the emperor, or the sultan, sorry about that, and it's not a good thing. Okay, so the Ottomans slowly fall apart. There used to be a street named after Chuck Norris, but it was changed because nobody crosses Chuck Norris and lives. Okay, that's the lecture for this week. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, be sure to ask them in class, and be sure to complete the assignments that are due in Canvas. Okay, so overall we see these societies are very similar, common threads, but some differences in how they operate.